You've heard this story before, right? It's the ultimate financial showdown. The little guy, the individual investor, going up against the absolute giants of Wall Street. It's a classic David versus Goliath tale, played out in the markets every single day.
Yeah, over in this corner, you've got Goliath, the massive institutional funds, the hedge funds with billions, sometimes trillions of dollars, whole armies of analysts, and literal supercomputers running their models. And then, in the other corner, you've got David, the retail trader, just one person, probably sitting at home, trying to make sense of it all.
And let's be real, when you look at that matchup on paper, it just seems completely impossible. The sheer size, the power, the resources of these big institutions, it feels like there's no way to win.
So that leads to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? How in the world can one person find any kind of an edge in a game that seems so completely stacked in favor of the giants?
Well, here's the secret. The answer isn't about trying to fight them on their terms or out-muscle Goliath. It's about being smarter, being faster, and really, it's about exploiting the hidden weaknesses that are created by their own massive size. And if you want proof, there is no better example than the absolutely wild story of GameStop. Okay, so let's talk about GameStop. This whole saga was a masterclass, really. It shows us exactly how a decentralized group of individuals found a huge, glaring blind spot in the strategy of some of the smartest, biggest funds on Wall Street, and then exploited it perfectly.
Now, to really get what happened, we need to understand one key concept, the short position. All you need to know is that these big funds were betting billions of dollars that GameStop stock was going to totally crash. They were borrowing shares, selling them immediately, and their whole plan was to just buy them back later for pennies on the dollar and pocket the difference. But, and this is a huge but, that whole strategy has one giant, fatal flaw. It's called a short squeeze. See, if the stock price starts going up instead of down, those short sellers start losing incredible amounts of money. To stop the bleeding, they are forced to buy back the shares they owe. But all of that buying just pushes the price even higher, which forces more short sellers to buy, which pushes the price higher. You see, it creates this insane, explosive feedback loop.
And this table just lays out the whole playbook perfectly. On one side, the institutional weakness. They had a massive, publicly visible short position. Everybody could see how overexposed they were. The retail advantage? Traders on places like Reddit identified this. Then you have the funds, who have these strict rules from their own investors that force them to automatically cut their losses. The retail side's counter? A super simple, coordinated strategy. Just buy and hold. And finally, a big fund can't buy or sell without moving the whole market. But thousands of tiny individual trades, they fly completely under the radar, adding up to this immense, inescapable pressure. And the results of all this, it was just staggering. The stock rocketed from less than $20 a share to a peak of over $400. It was an absolutely stunning demonstration of how collective, agile action can totally overwhelm a rigid, slow-moving giant.
But here's the thing, you don't need a once-in-a-generation short squeeze to compete. The second key advantage for retail traders is agility. It's the ability to find opportunity in places where the giants can't even look.
Think about it like this. A large fund is like a massive cargo ship. It's huge, it carries a lot of weight, but it needs a really deep harbor, and it takes miles to even make a turn. A retail trader, on the other hand, you're a speedboat. You can zip around in shallow waters and change direction on a dime. There's no board meeting, no compliance department, no red tape to cut through.
And that speed opens up entire corners of the market that are basically invisible to the big guys. We're talking about obscure small-cap stocks, assets that don't trade very often, or even some of the more exotic cryptocurrencies out there. A fund that has to deploy $100 million can't touch this stuff. Their first buy order would just swallow the whole market and send the price to the moon. But a $5,000 or $10,000 trade, it can slip in and out without making a ripple, capturing gains in places those big cargo ships can't even get to. So that brings us to the third and maybe the most sustainable advantage. And this one isn't about size or speed. It's about discipline. It's about turning our own human psychology from a major weakness into a core strength.
It all comes down to this core idea. You have to trade the plan, not the emotion. Look, both retail and professional traders are human. They all get hit by fear when a trade goes south, and by greed when things are going great. But here's the difference. An institutional trader has to answer to a nervous board and anxious clients. A retail trader, you're only accountable to yourself. And that gives you this amazing opportunity to build a personal, rigid system that takes emotion out of the equation. A huge part of that system is something called the asymmetrical bet. Now, it sounds a little complicated, but the idea is incredibly simple. It just means that for every $1 you're willing to risk losing on a trade, you are targeting a potential reward of at least $2. You define your exit for a loss and your exit for a profit before you ever enter the trade. The emotional, in-the-moment decision is just gone.
And here's why that is so incredibly powerful. With that simple 2-to-1 rule, you can be flat out wrong half the time, a 50% win rate, and still be profitable. Your wins are just twice as big as your losses, which creates a positive mathematical edge over the long run. It's not about being a perfect fortune teller. It's about having a system that makes money even when you're not.
So, let's tie all of this together. What does it all really mean? Well, beating Wall Street is not about having more money or more power. It's about finding and using these asymmetrical edges. And it really all boils down to 3 key principles.
First, exploit their blind spots. Find those situations, like GameStop, where the institutions are structurally vulnerable. Second, use your agility. Play in those niche markets where the big guys just can't go. And third, and maybe most importantly, master your own discipline. Automate your risk management with simple, asymmetrical rules and turn your own human weakness into a mechanical strength.
Which really leaves us with one final thought. The game isn't about trying to fight Goliath on his terms. It's about understanding that you have a different set of tools. So, in a market that's full of giants, the key is to ask yourself, what's your slingshot?